Hello, welcome to another episode of Montana Shares, your opportunity to find out about the nonprofits that make our state great. I'm your host, Bill Crane, and today I have Cassidy with the Lewis and Clark Humane Society. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bill.
So, I think everyone knows what Lewis and Clark Humane Society does. We can skip the high-level view. You've got an event coming up, and you've got, we'll just say 2 events coming up, essentially, one going on, whatever. Which do you want to talk about first?
Let's talk about the most immediate need, which would be our foster program first.
Okay.
We have lots of dogs, and we're actually undergoing construction because last winter was really rough on our building, and we had some serious ice dam damage. So we're having to tear out some walls where the kennels are, which means we're down a few kennels, and we have lots of dogs. So we've actually been in the long process of implementing a short-term foster program in order to get some dogs out of the shelter. And actually, we really need that right now because we need to get some dogs out of the shelter, even if it's just for 24 hours at a time, just because we are down some kennels.
Okay.
Yeah.
They need a break. You
they need a break.
Everyone.
We need a break. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
And you have a rather unique way of doing well, I guess they're super short-term, 24-hour ones. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So it's a new program based on some research that was done out of the Virginia Tech. Which is actually a professor who formerly was a professor at the anthrozoology program at Carroll.
Oh, wow.
And they did a lot of research on taking dogs out of the shelter environment for short-term periods. And short-term to them can be anywhere from 2 hours to 2 weeks. Okay. And what that data showed actually was contrary to everything that we believe. When we think about it's cruel to take an animal out of the shelter and then bring it back. What was actually happening is that their stress levels would go down when they would leave the shelter, and when they would come back to the shelter, they would stay down. So it's actually incredibly good for these dogs. It's incredibly good for us to get a different picture of their personality outside of the shelter. And it's great for people as well who either want to find out if they actually want to have a dog or if they can't commit the time to fully having a dog all the time. So they can't adopt, but they still want to help. So we actually have partnered with Home 2 Suites in Helena. They're a dog-friendly hotel. And so it's become what we call our Pajama Party foster program. It's a sleepover program. And so you can basically check a dog out for 24 hours, take it to Home 2 Suites in Helena, have a room there, and spend the night with this dog. And so you not only get to just hang out with a dog in a hotel, but you also come back and convey information to us about this dog that we might not learn in the shelter because they're a different dog outside of the shelter. So is it pretty simple? Sign some waiver that says you're checking out a dog, call the hotel up? So we have a questionnaire. It's kind of an application process, obviously to make sure that you're a good fit for the dogs and that, there's nothing standing in the way of you being able to do that. We'll let you take them to your home if you don't have other animals, but if you have other animals, maybe taking them to the hotel is going to be a better situation for you. So it's a short application questionnaire. And then you will actually do a very brief, 10-minute training video, and there's a quiz after that training video just to make sure that you know which situations these dogs should and shouldn't be in when you remove them from the shelter property. And then you'll get a call from us. We'll set up times that work best for you, and then we'll actually call the hotel and set up a room for you if that's the avenue that you choose to take.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yes.
And you've also kind of finished a session of some of these short-term fosterings on another program, so you've been practiced at it, right?
Yes, yeah. So we basically kind of did a beta testing program with it, where the very first people who took one of our dogs into the Home 2 Suites situation for the sleepover foster were actually 2 of our shelter staff. So they took Miss Ruby, and it was wonderful because they came back and they said, oh my gosh, we thought Ruby was this way, but we saw these behaviors outside of the shelter, so we actually think Ruby can do these things. So it's just incredibly invaluable to us, but they also figured out what works and what doesn't work, and all these things. So it's maybe we'll want to make sure we book a room that's right by an exit, so for potty time, things like that. But it has worked out really smoothly and wonderfully, and the Home 2 staff and management team have been incredibly accommodating, so it's just been really wonderful, and we're excited for what this means for our future for our foster program.
Right. And with this immediate need, it's super important as well.
Yes, super important with the immediate need. And there's also, the wonderful thing about it is that it's a short-term commitment, right? So you're not committing to taking a foster animal into your home for, 3 months. You can literally take them for 2 hours, or you can take them for 24 hours for a very brief amount of time. And it's so much easier to commit to, but it's invaluable for the shelter staff as well as the animals.
Okay. We might circle back to that study, but let's go on to your second one. You've got Spay-ghetti Dinner coming up.
Yes, so March 21st will be our annual Spay-ghetti Dinner. Most people from Helena are very familiar with the Spay-ghetti Dinner. The Lewis and Clark Humane Society has been doing the Spay-ghetti Dinner for 20 years. The very first one was held in the basement of the VFW, and we raised $2,500. And now it's come up to having, more than 800 people in attendance, and it's our biggest fundraiser that we do all year.
Okay. And so it's coming up in March?
Couple months, March 21st. Helena Civic Center, same place it's been the last several years. It's going to be a dinner. It's a very casual dinner. It's, spaghetti, as you can imagine. And then we also always have live and silent auctions, and it's just wall-to-wall silent auction items. And then we have some really amazing live auction items as well.
Okay. And if people, are the tickets available yet, or are we a little early on that?
No, tickets, we're a little early for that. We are in the very early planning stages in terms of getting sponsorships and things like that. But I always do a large announcement when tickets become available, and it's usually about a month in advance.
Okay, so put it on your calendar now.
Yes, mark your
March
calendars
21st,
now so you
right?
know when to be looking out for it, but not quite yet.
So just purely out of my curiosity, this study that, can you tell me anything more about it as far as?
Not a ton. I'm not the best person to talk to you about it. I can tell you that they did a very significant amount of research, and it was a very large study. It was not a small sample group. It was a very large study. And basically they literally were measuring stress hormones when the dogs would leave the shelter versus when they would get out of the shelter and when they would come back to the shelter. And basically what they showed is they would leave the shelter pretty stressed. Once they got out, their stress hormones would go down, and when they would come back, they remained down. So it's just invaluable because, the data that we have about how animals handle shelter life, some do very, very well. It's no big deal. They see it as perpetual playtime. They have friends, they have toys, but others, of course, it's a very stressful environment. And so it's just very beneficial not only to their health and well-being, but to getting them adopted, because obviously stress leads to certain behaviors and habits. And so it's just really incredibly interesting because it's counter to everything that we would think as humans and as our human emotions, like, oh, taking them out of the shelter and then just putting them right back, that's so mean. But it's actually incredibly invaluable to their health, to their well-being, and to how they adjust to life outside of the shelter once they are adopted as well.
Right. I think what you talk about as far as that behavior in and out is, we've been looking, as you know, for a new dog, and you'll see some in a pen that just, you're sure that they're not a fit at all, and that they are so agitated, and then you'll just take them out for a simple walk, just walk them out the door, and their personality changes in a minute, It's amazing to me.
And we always say, just see how they are when you get them off the property. Because I used to do that. I adopted a particularly difficult dog as well. And it was very incredibly interesting to me because I was taking him for walks and doing kind of a short-term sleepover foster program thing with him for about 2 months before I actually took him home. And the first time I ever took him for a walk, I crossed the threshold of the property, and it was almost like he was a different dog. So we always say never, ever, ever judge a dog based on the way they are in a kennel. Get them out of the kennel, interact with them. Because as you can imagine, being in a kennel can be very frustrating, and being behind a barrier can be very frustrating for a dog. And we see it all the time too with dogs who get adopted. Their parents will call us and say, oh my gosh, so-and-so loves kids, or they love meeting new people, and that is completely counter to the behavior that we saw in the shelter. And so we just always remind people to never judge a dog based on what they see in the shelter, because it can be incredibly different. Obviously, we only know what we can see and what foster parents can convey to us, but it's always incredibly important to get them off the property, or to get them even just out of the kennel into a play area, because the amount that they relax and open up is amazing, usually.
And in spite of the fact that you're sort of overloaded with dogs, especially with construction, you've placed a pile of dogs. You're still doing that day in and day out work of getting dogs placed all the time.
We were actually just talking this morning about we're getting multiple dogs out every day. It's just kind of one of those things where there's a turnover, right? You get a bunch of dogs out and then you get a bunch in.
Right.
So it's kind of hard to keep up, but I mean, our adoption staff is fantastic. This weekend this previous weekend we did a little bit of an adoption promotion and we got 6 dogs out, which was the amount of room we kind of needed in terms of the kennels. But now we're looking at hitting some really cold weather as well. And so having them outside while the construction is going during the day isn't nearly as convenient as it would be during the spring and summer, because it's getting cold, and then this coming week the temperatures are going to drop even more.
Yeah.
And so having them outside in those play yards right now just isn't an option because it's just too cold.
Right. Well, great. So just to wrap up, you've got the ability to, as the general public, to check out a dog.
Basically check out anywhere from 2 hours to 2 months.
Okay,
yes, absolutely.
Sort of a short-term fostering program,
Yep.
much needed right now.
Yep.
You've got Spay-ghetti Dinner coming up
Yes.
on March 21st, if I've hit it right.
Yes.
And I appreciate what you guys do in our
Thank you.
community and taking care of our pets. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
You bet. And thank you guys for tuning in. As always, have a wonderful day.